Okay, so you walk into the room. Gold is piled high into a mound of, like a hill, basically, of gold. And a goblin leaps out of the hill and tries to attack you. Roll initiative.
8 plus 2, that would be 10.
18. It's faster than you, so it goes first. It hits you with its club. Let's see if it hits. It does not hit you. It's your turn now.
Alright. Turn to the goblin and I cast my Burning Hand spell.
Alright, the goblin makes a spell save.
And he fails.
Fails. He takes full
3d6.
damage.
8.
You successfully slayed the goblin. And that, ladies and gentlemen, as you may very well know, is Dungeons & Dragons. Hi-ho, Cooter Reviews here, and today we're going to be reviewing the 5th edition starter set and some of the 5th edition books. So I'm going to pass it off to my cameraman, and yeah, here we go. So, first thing we're going to review in this big old video, probably the longest video I've ever made, is this starter set. Now, the starter set, apart from looking cool, has everything you need to get started playing Dungeons & Dragons. It has pre-made, I guess I'll just show you what it does. It has these dice, which are all necessary for playing the game. If you have all sorts of different dice, and you're probably going to be using all of these from level 1 to 20. So, you know, it's very important to have them. It also comes with a bunch of pre-made characters, which are basically characters that were designed and made by wizards. Wizard of the Coast, that's who makes Dungeons & Dragons themselves. As you can see, my character sheets are lightly used by my lovely players. It comes with the starter set rulebook. It's not really that many rules. You don't really like that. It's got the most important essentials like combat and walking and other stuff. It's got the quintessentials, but it doesn't have a lot in this book. It's very, very small, as you can see. It's just the basics, the quintessentials. We also have, it also comes with The Lost Mine of Phandelver, which is an adventure, which will get your PCs through level, from level 1 to level 5. It should get them there anyway, as long as they don't die, it should get them there anyway. It's got a bunch of encounters, yeah, it's a book, and it's a small adventure. You basically, the starter set allows you to start playing with the minimum amount of effort required. You can just buy the starter set and just start playing. Next thing we're going to review, next thing on the chopping block, is the Player's Handbook, which is basically probably the most important out of these books, in my opinion. It basically allows your players to create their own characters and tells them what equipment it is, what their equipment does, and yeah, all that goodness is in the Player's Handbook. So let's get right into the Player's Handbook. The first thing you should know about the Player's Handbook, or the Monster Manual, or the Dungeon Master's Guide, or any of these books, is that they're not rule books. You do not have to obey exactly what they say. In fact, most Dungeon Masters used homebrew, which is a style of play where they basically make up their own rules to fit their game better. But these are like the basis. This is the handbook. These are suggestions. So what is written in here is not law. It's basically what is suggested by of the coast themselves. So the first thing about the second thing about these books is they have some of the most beautiful artwork on them I've ever seen on like books like this. As you can see, this beautiful giant artwork is wonderful. The Beholder, the Lich, all the different artworks they have is wonderful. And there's tons more inside the book themselves. And you can see all these beautiful pages of artwork. And so, this book, the Player's Handbook, is basically telling your players how to create their characters, how to create their backstories for their characters, and basically just how to play the basics of the game, except not super basic. It's like pretty advanced, I guess. It gets pretty involved. It gets more involved than the little manual they give you in the starter set anyway. But it's not super complex. 5th edition is significantly less complicated than 4th edition. But you can see that you look and you find all the different races your character could be. You've got elves and dwarves and gnomes and dragonborns and all this really wonderful world building. You see elves and dwarves, and so basically your players, by looking through this book, will decide what race they want to be, like a half elf or half orc. And as you can see, the art is wonderful, wonderful art. And yeah, that's chapter 2 is the classes. The chapter 4, I believe, is just like the introduction and basics of the game. Yeah, that's basically what it is. But it's really, like, I can't stress enough how wonderful the artwork is in these books. And this isn't even the Monster Manual. The Monster Manual has the real artwork, in my opinion. You can see that you also find the classes that your character can be, if I can find them in here. You can find all the sorts of different classes, like a bard, who's basically a magic performer, all sorts of stuff. So it's very helpful to deciding on your race and your class. It's basically the main point of the book. But the book also details your personality and your background. Here you see all the backgrounds and personalities that the book suggests. Of course, if you really wanted to, you could make your own. By all means, you can make your own. But you can see there's tons of different variations for character. And the book will tell you exactly how the characters should behave. Not saying that they will behave within your campaign of Dungeons & Dragons, but that's how they're, like, suggested to behave. It also tells you, the Player's Handbook also tells you all the information on different weapons and equipment, which is useful for playing the game. Like, heavy armor is better than light armor, and all that sorts of stuff. It tells you about mounts and vehicles, tools, everything you basically know about making your character and, like, combat, or how your character would react in combat. It also tells you all the spells that each class can learn, so you know how much damage that each of the spells do and what exactly the spells do in the game. But of course, if your dungeon master starts bending the rules, you know what you do? Nothing. You just go along with it. You should just go along with it. The rules are not rules; they're guidelines. So if somebody says, somebody you're playing with says, "I want to be able to turn into a rat," and he wants to be a rogue, why not? As long as he's balanced in the game, it works. And of course, you don't want to. No, that is the character I made based on the sole purpose of being a rat. He's a rogue, and he shouldn't have any spells at level 1, but he does. And so, Dungeons & Dragons is really a game about creativity. So if you want to take these guidelines and bend them a bit, feel free to, because if it's going to make the game more interesting for the Dungeon Master and the players, by all means do it. So, yeah, it tells you like trinkets and stuff. It doesn't really matter that much what your trinket is. It doesn't do anything, but it's there if you want it. There's tons of different stuff. Like, there's so much detailing in this book, I really can't get into it now. Like, there's so much stuff in here. It tells you about initiative, which is basically who goes first in combat, and how combat encounters work, and how skill challenges, and all this very useful stuff, all within this book, all there to help out the players. But most of the time, players are not going to actually buy this book. The person who's going to buy this book is the Dungeon Master, who's going to use it to help their players, usually. But if a player wants it just because they want it, by all means you should get it. If you just want it to have so you can create characters whenever you want, then that's perfectly reasonable. But most of the time the Dungeon Master will get this and help out the players create their characters. And so, as a Dungeon Master, you might not see this as very useful, but trust me, this book is extremely useful for creating NPCs and villains and basically whatever you want. You can go through the races and look at all the names that the races give you. You can, I don't know, you can obviously take whatever weapons and just give them to your monsters that you want. You can basically use the book, the player's handbook, just as much as the players are going to use the player's handbook. Which is probably only going to be for short amounts of time because the players only need to make a character like once, unless they die. But that's just how it works, you know? You're probably going to use it more than them, honestly, which is, you know, good. And it's pretty simple to find your way around. You got the it's all in alphabetical order. So say in the middle of your game, somebody is like, man, I forgot how much damage a dagger does. You can just fly into equipment and go to dagger, and the dagger stats will be there, and it'll tell you how much damage a dagger does. And so it's very, very handy to have with you at all times. And so, with that, we move on to the monster manual. Ooh. The monster manual is personally my favorite of the books because mostly the artwork. To be frank, it's mostly the artwork. The artwork in this book is stunning. The monsters look fantastic, and it's extremely, extremely helpful at being a dungeon master. And so, you see there's countless options of pre-made monsters right here for the taking. You can just take any of them and plop them into your game as long as it makes sense. The players get challenged by it. Hopefully it doesn't kill them all, but if it does, you know. You can find something and you're like, oh, a carrion crawler. That makes so much sense. They're about to crawl through the giant corpse of, I don't know, like a giant dragon. They're about to crawl through the rotting corpse of a dragon. Carrion crawlers would make perfect sense to be there. Probably should have picked a less gross option, but hopefully none of you guys are eating. But you can see there's all sorts of different monsters that apply to basically anything, any location or situation that you need. And you've got all sorts of different monsters, and it gives the stats of the monsters, and basically it lets you know how the monsters are look normally. You of course can tweak how the monsters look or how the monsters behave, or the stats of the monsters at any time you want. So, I guess to show you the stats of the monster, we will look at one of the most famous of all D&D monsters, the Beholder. So if you look closely at the Beholders, well, giant block of text here. It looks pretty spooky, like from the DM's perspective, like, oh no, I have to read all of this. But it's not honestly that much. It looks a lot more than it is. It's basically broken down into a couple different sections. The armor class, which is basically if the players want to hit the monster, like they have to roll dice, and if they beat the armor class or match the armor class, which is 18, they'd get to hit the monster, which is the beholder. And if they got below that, they wouldn't be able to do it. It tells you its 6 points right below its armor class, which is 180 for this guy. The beholder can fly 20 feet. It tells you how far and fast it can move, which is 20 feet per turn. It's got saving throws, which are insane. Those will only come up when your character uses something that requires that specific saving throw, which will say right in the spell. The condition immunities, which just tells you what the condition immunities are. Senses, tells you all your senses, languages, etc. Challenge underneath it tells you how challenging it should be. And if you have a bunch of 3rd level players and you go, hey, I'm gonna throw a Tarrasque at them, and then you look and you're like, it's probably not that hard, and then you rate its challenge level of 30, maybe you might want to reconsider throwing a Tarrasque at them. Just a thought. Unless you want to kill all your players, then feel free to throw a Tarrasque at them.
Mm-hmm.
But, you can see, that's where its challenge rating is, and right above all this stuff, and below its speed, and above its saving throw, are its nice stats. Now, if you look at its stats, this beholder in particular has very high stats. And its stats basically affect the roll. But, you know, this isn't the video to teach you how to play D&D. This is the video to show you that the books are good. But it's very organized. It tells you how good the stats are. Tells you what kind of creature the beholder is. In this case, an aberration. It's lawful evil. So if your PCs use detect evil, they will detect evil. Large aberration. That's like, there's different classes of monster. We don't need to get into that right now, but there are different classes of monster. And so you can see the art is just fan-flippin-tastic on all of these pages. And sometimes I just look through the pages and I just look at all the art, all the monster art. And it's just great monster art, you know? And if you flip all the way to the back, another thing this book has, which is very handy, are the miscellaneous monsters, which aren't like the monsters, but are like animals, like generic, normal, everyday animals, and some humans do. And so it's all in alphabetical order, all the animals are. And you can see that there's tons of different animals that you can use, like jackals or hyenas or killer whales, and they all have stats. Of course, if there's an animal that's not in here, feel free to create its own stats. Like, say you want to make a kangaroo, feel free to create its own stats and, like, everything that you need. But it's got a ton of things that you might need. It's, like, got the basic creatures that you probably need. And then you flip to non-playable characters, and it gives you a bunch of generic characters, which you can just copy and paste and plop them right into your game with ease. So it's got like bandits and occultists and all sorts of fun stuff. If I could open up the page, and thugs, and basically all the NPCs that you could really need. And so there's that. If you flip to the front of the thing, it introduces, not that front, but if you flip to like here, it's the table of contents, tells you where all the monsters are. This comes in handy if you're looking for the stats of a specific monster. It tells you what monsters use, and types of monsters, and all the important information you need to know about monsters. Like, the introduction is probably one of the most useful of all the introductions in the books. And yeah, It's just a book that tells you all sorts of different monsters. Whether you're looking for mindless goons to be slaughtered in a horde, or you're looking for the final boss of your 20 level campaign, you can find it all in the book, alongside beautiful, beautiful art. Now, I'm going to turn the video over to my Lil J. I'm going to turn the video over to Lil J, who is going to be reviewing the Dungeons Master Guide for me, because I'm going to be honest with you, I did not read the Dungeon Master's Guide yet, since it is not mine, but...
You have committed a sin.
I know. But now Lil J is going to take over for the Dungeon Master's Guide. And,
Alright.
yeah.
Starting out, got this really nice art, as Cool Dude Reviews said. Got this really nice lich reanimating a human. Appears to be a fighter. Anyway, open up the book, immediately you see black. Moving on, you're greeted with this image. Once again, great art. Dungeon Master's Guide. Not reviewing every page, don't worry about it. Here you got table of contents, pretty standard. It's divided into different parts, which at first just kind of looks a bit strange for a book to be divided into parts instead of just simple chapters, but you'll really enjoy it after looking through the book for a while. Part 1 is really about creating your world, simple stuff, creating towns, and then it moves on to creating like the planet itself, how magic works, some of like laws of physics in your world. Then it moves on to creating the multiverse, creating the different planes of existence. Then part 2 talks about your adventures, different types of styles of play, which if you want to mix it up after playing a couple of the same campaigns is very nice and very refreshing. Chapter 4 is creating NPCs, which is really nice in case, say, you want to have a party member, page 89. Designing NPCs itself, once again, page 89. Villains, villainous class options, extra people. Really nice to really make your world come to life. And that's really what this book is dedicated for. Just making your characters come to life. Adventure environments, dungeons, the wilderness, the forest, hills, caves. This is really creating encounters and creating your world. Once again, make it really feel lived in and really feel alive. Then, of course, you have traps. One of my personal favorite things in this entire book is just looking through the trap section. You have simple stuff, pitfalls, snares, but then it gets into things like poison needles. There are a lot of really interesting traps in this book. And then, of course, we have treasure. Types of different treasures. Stuff to make you money, weapons, magic items, artifacts. Tons of great stuff in there. Also, your tween adventure, which is linking different types of adventures. So say one day your party is in a tavern, tricking drunk people into doing things. And then next day they are working and doing quests for the gods. That tells you how to link those two very strange things together. Trust me, I have. This book makes it work. Running your game, Chapter 8. Just some basic rules, although most rules are covered in the player's handbook, but this is really just for the DM's type of thing, because the DM has to run the entire multiverse, where the players have to play their characters, they have to run their NPCs, the enemies. Pretty hard work being a DM, but with this book completely dedicated to it, it makes it much, much easier. Chapter 9, The Dungeon Master's Workshop. This is probably my favorite chapter in the book. In here, you have creating monsters, creating spells, creating magic items, creating your characters, creating abilities. This is really for people who want to homebrew. This pretty much makes it very easy. Random dungeons, it already has some designs for dungeons, doors, passages, chambers. It's pretty nice. Appendix B, monsters list. Just some more monsters. Although for monsters, I was already reviewed, monster manual, definitely the way to go. Then you have maps. You have inspiration for the Dungeon Master, page 316, which, if I remember correctly, is recommendations of literature. Once again, very nice artwork. even the Dungeon Master's Guide, it has great artwork, really telling stories. Like here, this guy, very injured, and this elf trying to heal him, and it looks like he just wants to go back out to battle. Nice image of a dragon. And here is actually categorizing things by the challenge level. So if you're trying to figure out what people can fight and what people will die instantly to, you can get it right here from a nice organized list. Anyway, continuing. Here are some maps, and just some other really nice stuff. Boat designs, field designs, it's very nice. Now, like I said before, Dungeon Master inspiration. It has inspiration with literature, other games. It's really great. If you really are really trying to get into D&D and looking for some inspiration, it's a great place to start. That's about it for the Dungeon Master's Guide. Back to you, Cool Reviews.
Alright, cameraman. So, this is Xanthar's Guide to Everything. And basically what Xanthar's Guide to Everything is quite simply an additional book. It is not really part of this trio, it's part of another trio which includes Volvo's Guide to Monsters and the what's the other one?
Sword Coast Adventure Guide.
Sword Coast Adventure Guide. But it basically adds a bunch of not race options, but a bunch of class, or I guess subclass options and different spells and magic items that you can use within your campaign and your players can use within the campaign. And so the first thing is there's a bunch of character character options. It actually goes on for about like a third of the book. Most of the book actually is just character options, and it makes sense. It's kind of the point of the book. After that, it basically tells you more information on dungeons, not dungeons, but like on areas like swamps or underwater or in the city or in the hills or the grasslands. Basically tells you a bunch of different encounters or building an encounter or area or spellcasting or just sleep falling, tons of stuff about like the nitty gritty of DMing. And it also goes into some magic items because, you know, magic items are extremely important to this game. It introduces new spells, shared campaign, I don't know what that is, but shared campaigns, and even more character names. So we've got tons of stuff, and character names is extremely important. As a DM, when your players go up to the random farmer and go, "What's his name?" and you go, Frank. His name's Frank. In medieval times on another universe, his name's Frank. It doesn't really work, and it makes it just uncomfortable for the players to be like, Frank, what seems to be troubling you? Frank. It's just not the greatest of things. But as you can see, here are all the different class options or subclasses. So once your players will reach a certain level, they're able to change class. They are able to take up more classes, but they're able to go into subclasses of their class that they're already in. So like they can become an arcane archer if they're, I don't know what you'd be before that, but probably like a fighter. They could become a magic archer. There's cavalier and samurai. These are all fighters, I suppose. Nemesis. A paladin can become a nemesis or a temptation. That's kind of a weird name for a class, but okay.
It's not a class.
Haha.
Character creation.
I'm dumb.
Mm-hmm.
Just shoot me now. But it's a subclass of paladin. I don't know what the subclass is. Oh no, it's just character creation. Never mind then. Just ignore me. Just ignore the words coming out of my mouth. Not all of them though. Not all of them. You can become a bunch of different things like gloom stalkers if you're a ranger. There's just a ton of different subclass options where you go from normal ranger to a horizon walker or a monster slayer, and it's just really cool to be something different. Yeah, for a player to be something different in the world of your campaign. Like, there's could be thousands of rangers running around, but I bet there's not as many monster slayers as there are rangers. Probably. And it'll make your players feel special, and that's pretty cool. And as you can see, the different class options just keep going on, and tons of different class options. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Definitely gives your character a bit of a unique flair compared to other ones, to other characters. You also get racial feats, which allow you to do special things, I presume. I haven't looked through this section yet. But it does special things for you, so that's good, depending on your race. It has a bunch of dungeon tools for the Dungeon Master, like telling you how falling works, or waking, or all this stuff. The nitty-gritty, basically. Like, you're probably not gonna, you probably are gonna encounter at some point, but not when you're first beginning, but you're probably gonna eventually encounter stuff like what this deals with. And of course, it goes through, and this is very handy. It tells you what creatures would make sense for each area that they're going for, like a random encounter, basically. That would work for their area at their level. So you see, like the forest encounters at level 17 through 20, they can fight. These aren't random encounters, but they are encounters. So at level 17 through 20, it'd be perfectly reasonable to have a green giant. But if you did the same thing to a level 5 party, they would get obliterated horrifically. But it basically goes and tells you what creatures exist in what areas of the world, which is very handy to have on your back, at your fingertips. Very, very good information to have. Then we get into what's it called? Oh, traps. We get into all these different kind of traps, and it tells you how the traps, like how to create a trap. Basically, how to use little ideas like pitfalls or all the stuff that he mentioned. Some of the stuff that he mentioned before is just a little bit more detailed about like triggers of traps and stuff like that. Yeah, and tells you how to design them. So it just gives you all the bits and pieces you need to fit together to make your own traps. It tells you how to create important characters, like rivals or villains, and it gives you a bunch of names. And yeah, you can see all this like sorts of important stuff. Oh, bunch of magic items. These are really cool. So, does special things like this pipe of smoke monsters. While smoking this pipe, you can use an action and form a single creature. So you can like create a creature out of smoke, like Gandalf from Lord of the Rings. You can do that as a magic item, and there's tons of stuff like that. There's tons of really cool magic items. Then you can either create your own using the guide, or you can just pluck and place in your world. You have spells, and it gives you a bunch of extra spells that your players can learn that I don't believe are in the player's handbooks. So these are a bunch of special spells that were added with not Volv's Guide, Xanthar's Guide. Or not, yes, Xanthar's Guide to Everything. That's good. It tells you a bunch of different spells that you can do, and it's very cool. Yeah, you can see like summon a demon and make yourself. Does that make yourself immortal? There's no. Alright, that's not making yourself immortal. But you know prison and all this different spells and stuff. But what I really want to get into are the names. Look at all these names. Look, oh, it's a name chart. You want to know what happens with this? Alright, so there's, say you're just like, yeah, there's a dwarf, and he serves you drinks. And he's just kind of hanging out, and he's not important at all to the play. What's his name? Well, now, thanks to this handy-dandy chart, you just roll a d20 and say 17, dwarf, 17. Haha. That's not what this is. But you could still use it like that, but you just look at this and you just go, his name's Gummer. Or you can be like, oh, I need a name for that villain that they're going to face in the next campaign or the next mission. She's gonna be an elf. What's a good elf name? Boom, Valna. That's a great evil name, or maybe it isn't a great evil name. It's up to you, really. So you got all these names, and you can just pick and choose what names you want to use, and it's just great. It's just great to have some names just lying around. Or Arabic name? They just stole names from Arabic.
For humans.
For humans. That's kind of cool. That they kind of just put some names in here from like actual human societies. It's kind of cool. I saw Polynesian earlier. Human names. Oh yeah. So if you look, all the human names are based off different actual names, like Egyptian names or Celtic or Chinese, and you can see all these different names that are actual real names, like all this stuff. This would be very handy too. Say you want to make a duke, you can name him Adelard, Duke of Dupleton. But yeah, this is very helpful. This is like an extension to the Dungeons Master's Guide, as well as an extension to the Player's Handbook at the same time. It's helping you and the players immensely. So, that was my review of the basic 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons stuff. I really like Dungeons and Dragons. It's a very fun game. It's fun to just look at these pages and look through the art. And, I don't know, I just like the art. The game is tons of fun. So if you're thinking about picking it up, I definitely recommend it. It is a little complicated, not gonna lie, but it is so much fun to pick up and play with your friends, or design a campaign for your friends. You do need friends though, so if you don't got those, then you probably shouldn't be trying to play Dungeons & Dragons. But hey, you probably play with. So you get your friends around a table like this with their character sheets, and you sit as the DM or them or somebody else playing the DM, and you all get together and you just start playing sometimes, you know. So I definitely recommend Dungeons and Dragons for anybody with a creative juice flowing who wants to go on great adventures but also not die in real life. For people like Or like, man, I should direct a movie. I have such great ideas, like for this game, for this sci-fi setting or whatever. But Dungeons and Dragons is for you. Except maybe not Dungeons and Dragons, but tabletop games are for you. If you're like, man, if only I had $100 million so I could make this movie. Well, now you can just gather around and not do that, really. But it's different experience, but it's really cool. It's a really fun game. You're not going to be able to make a movie, but you're going to be able to imagine that you made a movie. You're going to look back and you're going to be like, hey, remember that time you died from a goblin? Or the entire party almost died from one single goblin because you couldn't hit it, and then you hung that goblin? That was a pretty funny time.
That was a good time.
You get all these sorts of funny stories, and it's just a fun game. So, if you are already into tabletop games and you already played them, I don't know why you stayed till the end of this video, but hi. Dungeons and Dragons. If you're looking to get into it, it's pretty easy. You don't need all these books to start getting into it. You really just need this. That's the first thing you need, and then if you and your friends or your family like it, then by all means, make the investment of getting all the other books. It'll be tons of fun, trust me. Yeah, and even if you don't play the game for very long and you lose interest, at least you'll have some pretty cool artwork, am I right? So thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, a like would be greatly appreciated. Subscribe if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell because I will see you guys in the next video. Toodles!